Welcome to our show, AdAstra With. Today we have the great privilege of having Scott Macklin on the show for great conversations spanning the transformation of the new space industry, perspectives on leadership, career growth, team building, and where humanity should focus its efforts on building an off-Earth colony. Such a fun topic.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this topic.
Too.
It's been a good one. So everybody, please welcome Scott Macklin to the show. Scott received his bachelor's and master's at USC while being heavily involved in several unique projects, including the experimental CubeSat in Japan and USC's Rocket Propulsion Laboratory, which became the first student group to successfully design, build, and launch a rocket to space.
That is so cool.
That's quite the accomplishment as a student. Holy cow.
Wow.
I blew up a few of the rockets and then they got it right.
I mean, wouldn't be right if you did.
Yeah.
He then began his full-time career at SpaceX, where we were in the same group, actually, and that's how we met. Very fun. While simultaneously completing his master's degree, but was soon heavily recruited over to Virgin Galactic's Advanced Concepts Group that became Launcher One, or Virgin Orbit's air-launched orbital rocket. Woo. Very cool. Very cool. A little bit of a mouthful, but I think I got that out there. And then Scott was responsible for development of the first stage engine before becoming a chief engineer and ultimately senior director of propulsion and director of test, flight, and launch operations at their Mojave site. After leading the propulsion team through their first 3 successful orbital missions, Scott sets out on a new challenge, which is to lead a startup called Gravitics as their director of engineering.
That might, for those of you who have read the company name before and maybe you're like, what is Gravitics? You may have pronounced it in your head as Gravitics. Is that how people often
I've been
mispronounce
practicing
it?
for a long time.
Yeah, that's probably going to be our biggest challenge.
Yeah,
I think I made it through about 90% of my negotiations before I learned I had been saying it wrong the whole time.
That's awesome.
Wonderful that I still got the job.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Oh my gosh, so funny. And quick introduction of Brian and I, for those of you who don't know us. I'm Seyka. I'm massively passionate about hiring thriving teams. I love people, and I see the work of bringing excellent people together to achieve world or outside of the world changing goals as my life's work. And I get to do that every day and work with the coolest clients as founder and CEO of AdAstra, where we do headhunting for executive and highly technical roles in the new space and clean tech industries. Essentially, we find the people you need to change the world.
And hey, everybody, I'm Brian. I have a background in aerospace engineering, got my bachelor's and master's in aerospace from the University of Michigan before working at SpaceX, primarily as a propulsion engineer, where I met Scott. And
good times.
those were some interesting months. It wasn't, I think we only worked together for 6 months or so?
Yeah,
but
about right.
It was good while it lasted. Yeah. Lots of memories. And then was at an early stage startup in the Bay Area working on drone technology before starting AdAstra with Seyka, and I'm working as our COO and CTO.
Awesome.
Wonderful. So we'll jump in now. Scott, you've grown your career at SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, and now at Gravitics.
Almost. Gravitics. By the end of this hour, we're gonna have it.
We're gonna have it. And those are a lot of very influential organizations. How have you seen the culture of the industry change over the past 10 years?
Wow, that's interesting. Probably quite a few different ways we could address that.
Yeah.
But maybe first few things that come to mind, there's been an increasing tolerance in a lot of ways, increasing tolerance or expectation of building in, I think, more diverse pipelines into the industry. And I mean that in every sense, race, gender, background of experience, whether you're from aerospace or automotive or an even more kind of tangential offshoot industry where you can bring new perspectives. So I think that's been wonderful. I think there's also been a growing tolerance in the sense of people are really recognizing, I think through more visibility, the trials and tribulations that go into space flight. You hear over and over, space is hard. That's a little bit overplayed, but it's true. People are beginning to understand.
4 launch failures in the first 2 weeks of.
Yeah, it's been a rough week or two.
Yeah,
right.
And wow, that'll continue. but the wonderful thing, and I think SpaceX in particular really did a wonderful job, blazing this trail of showing just fully open. This is when we get it right. This is when we get it wrong. Oh, it sure sucks when we get it wrong, but also a pretty cool fireball. Let's try again. And that's really shifted the mentality for people to get excited about all the iterative development they can do, but also be a little more empathetic for those folks that are just giving their all for long stretches into the night for a very long time.
Yeah, and I've definitely noticed. Of course, there's jabs and jokes about other companies and stuff like that, but in general, everyone wants everyone else to succeed. When we've seen failures at other companies, while it's at SpaceX or something like that, you are saddened by that. No one wants to see that. That sets the whole industry back. But it's also a very resilient industry that knows that these failures are going to happen, and where the real change and progress happens is driving through them. And I think that's really fun to see.
Oh, it's true. Absolutely. My own perspective, every team that I've built or work with, over and over and over, you talk about, yes, I expect you to fail because I expect to fail. Can't expect you to be perfect. We will fail. I don't care about that. How do you bounce back?
That's so good.
It's critical, and you will fail in the industry. There will be setbacks. That is how you learn. We all talk about it, but keep going. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And talking about how, I think it's a really great point that you're bringing up the diversity that we're bringing into the industry, and how that wasn't maybe the case 10 years ago. We have a lot of people who reach out to us who are outside of the industry, who are so excited and so thrilled about the mission of space and really want to get involved. But at a lot of startups, we do see that there is a resistance or a concern to bring in people from outside of the industry because for one reason or another, right, their experience maybe isn't as high reliability, or the outcomes of their work isn't safety critical. And so it's a little scary to take on somebody with maybe transferable skills. What insights can you share? What have you seen when building your own teams for bringing people in who maybe aren't coming from doing that exact work before?
Yeah, that's great, and there's a lot in there. Let me maybe just start personally, right? From personal experience, a lot of times, failure to get into a new discipline or industry can be, often an emotional barrier, not an actual intellectual barrier.
That's good.
We talk a lot about, agile hardware development and agile software development, the new trends in aerospace. That actually applies to your own personal development too, right? You have to go look for those weak areas in your domain knowledge, where you're weak, challenge your own worldview and knowledge base, break some things in your own personal development and try again and go. So, first of all, I encourage everyone out there that's thinking along those lines to be confident and persistent. Look for ways that you can enter in and join. It's absolutely true that, not every role is right for every person at that right moment in time, of course.
Yeah.
Sometimes a company will need a lot of previous experience stepping into a very critical role. That's not always true. That can't be true for all of it. And just looking practically, right? We keep talking about how this is a growing industry, a growing economy. Well, then you have to be growing that population set in the industry. So we have to be encouraging people to be coming in from different perspectives, from different industries.
Wow, you're dropping truth bombs right here. I want to highlight that. I just want to pause for a second and have the audience. I know we've got people who are listening who are really interested to getting into this industry, and I want to make sure that they're able to really gather what you were picking up there and talking about. That barrier can be an inside job, right? You said that sometimes that's an emotional barrier. It's not just a skill barrier, and being able to see what technical areas you need to grow yourself and expand your knowledge so that you are able to step into those roles. Again, an inside job. That was really powerful.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So you saw fast leadership growth at Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit. What advice do you have for others who would like to grow in the technical leadership route?
Mhm. Well, the simplest thing, and I know you've heard it before, I'm sure, but challenge yourself and scare yourself.
Yeah.
I appreciate that it has been a fast progression, in title, and I'm grateful for that. But believe it or not, the primary objective wasn't the title.
Yeah.
The primary objective in every single assignment that I took on, which led to every job that I took on, was really the ones that terrified me, that I felt there's no way in hell I am qualified to be doing this. I'm pretty terrified. They'll find me out soon enough.
Yeah.
But, really scared to get going. And that is, in the end, every single time, the reason I ended up taking it was because I admitted that I was scared to take it.
So good. That's so good. Wow.
Yeah.
Incorporating the imposter syndrome, right? And understanding that that's a component and taking that step anyway. What are some ways, some tools that you've used in order to build yourself up once you've taken on a role that terrifies you? Do you rely on strong mentorship? Do you look to kind of build that up yourself? What does that look like for you?
Well, we're all lucky when we have good mentorship,
Yeah.
and that's definitely true for me. That has been very true at SpaceX and at Virgin and even now at Gravitics and people outside of each of those companies. Definitely seek out people that you think there's no way you can possibly ever climb to their level of knowledge and pick their brain. But when you're on the job, it's time to now put the self-doubt behind you. All of engineering is breaking down very complex tasks into very, simple, more manageable, bite-sized, chunks of development.
Yeah.
The same is true with any role that you have to take on. What are the most important issues? We'll start there. We'll break down from there. Into the first steps that you take. And you take a little bit of comfort in the ambiguity beyond those first few steps.
Yeah.
Because you're going to learn so much in the first few steps to better guide, actually, the next 3 steps.
Yeah. Wow. So good.
This
do
is
not,
incredible.
you do not, I'm really blown away by this. This is so actionable.
We have
and
time
useful.
for me to change your mind. Don't
No,
worry.
no. This is so actionable and useful. So what I'm hearing you say is you take the step that's terrifying, and even when you're looking at the big problem going, I don't know that I can handle all of this, when you break it down into much smaller actionable steps, you don't have to take on the whole big problem all at once. You can take on small segments, and that can release a lot of that kind of terror.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Awesome. How much team building have you done?
Well, I'd like to think a lot.
Yeah.
When I joined at Virgin, there were probably, it's hard to count it. It was a special project within Virgin Galactic. But the group that grew into Virgin Orbit, there were probably 10 or 12 of us
Awesome.
when I started, engineers and business development and technicians. And when I left, there were about 40 engineers in the propulsion organization, and another about 50 or so at the Mojave test and launch site.
Wow.
Here at Gravitics, we're starting, again, very small. That's part of the fun for me.
Yeah.
We've got about 10 engineers right now.
Okay, awesome. And what is some of your strategy around finding the right people for your team?
Well, again, it won't be one size fits all for every role at every point in time. I do personally care a lot about getting perspectives in from outside of the industry. Not every role is meant to be, you've done this 5 times and you're stuck in your ways, from 5 previous times doing this. But sometimes you're going to need that scar tissue from getting it wrong a couple times to be laying out a good framework for the architecture that we're all going to build from. And then you're filling in the pieces of that architecture with fresh blood, fresh perspective, someone from any other industry out there. So, from a practical skills level, that's something I'm thinking about, but it depends on each role. Cheesy as it sounds, it definitely starts with attitude and culture. Are they going to be growth oriented?
Yeah.
Are they intrinsically motivated? Because we've got a very, very hard years-long development road ahead of us. If you're looking for instant gratification, probably not the right role for you. It's going to really draw on you. So, looking for the right mindset, very good attitude, willing to get things wrong and grow from that, and bounce back, like we talked, before, and someone that will be a true, giver in the organization.
Yeah.
At Gravitics, we talk about that all the time, right? I want a giver culture.
Yeah.
And that's, a giver in many senses of the word, right? Every organization will have a giver or a taker.
Yeah.
And I want the people that, we're going to be holding people accountable to their own deliverables, right? To remain a member of the team.
Yeah.
But that in and of itself isn't enough. Are you, I don't want a dog eat dog organization. If you have that, you build up silos with bad requirements and bad interfaces. So want everyone working together, offering their help into the other groups when they observe things. And that is what leads you to a very interconnected system when we're building a complex system.
Yeah.
So, really looking for the people that are going to step up and help others, even when they're busy, even when they're stressed. And then you can build a good team around that. Yeah,
that's very, very cool. Is the giver taker kind of philosophy based off of the book? There's
probably.
Okay. I'm forgetting the name of the book, but there's a book, I think it's might be called Givers and Takers. But anyway, it breaks people into that. Okay, so I was just curious about that. So that intrinsic motivation, so valuable, right? When people are they've got their own drive. They're not looking to the organization to build that drive for them, right? Because there are ups and downs. There are long-term goals that you're going to have to be hiking up a mountain for a while before you get to that, high altitude lake view. So what are some tools or interview questions, or how do you seek that out in people?
Oh, well, let me think about that. Some of it, comes down to the ad hoc conversation that you end up getting into and the real human to human interaction in it. But, I love asking people, the standard, what are some things that you're great at? Fine, cool. What I enjoy much more is, asking them what's something you're terrible at. And then I ask them tell me about the time you just really effed it up.
Yeah.
I want to hear about your biggest professional screw up. Because you learn a lot from someone about that. Is that something that, they can really talk to thoughtfully? It shows they were actually very involved in that problem.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's a solution.
Yeah.
Did they shirk away from it? Did they pass off blame? Do they take ownership for it or not? And what did they learn from it, most importantly?
Yeah, that's so good. That's that's a really great question. It's been a common theme in a couple of our conversations. It's come up. I've interviewed people where, I'm digging into their background and something's just not quite feeling right. They're, it's not vibing when I'm trying to dig deep into the work that they've done. And I'll throw in a question like, tell me about one of the biggest mistakes you've made. And I've had I've had two different times in recent experience, somebody say, "Oh, I can't think of any." I'm like, and it wasn't, and I'll draw the distinction. It wasn't, give me a second. Sorry, I didn't prepare for this. Hold on, I need like a couple minutes to think through. Right? It's not a my mind's going blank problem. It was an answer of, I don't think I made a mistake, and we were like, oh, well, that's the end of this conversation, right?
Goodbye.
Yeah. We've all made mistakes, and so are you able to face those demons? Are you able to, it's really uncomfortable to make a mistake, right? There are a lot of feelings, right? Physical sensations that go through our bodies, stories we tell ourselves about. See, I knew I wasn't good enough to take this role, and now I broke, $100,000 worth of hardware, and that's not the case. In fact, the mistakes that we've made give us the opportunity to digest that, consume that, learn from that, and pass that information on to our team.
That's exactly it right there. I always, in all of the teams that I'm involved in, I try to phrase it as, we'll brag about our failures.
Yeah.
It's not just admitting them. It's actually getting the team to a point of comfort where you get to brag about that. Oh, I effed that one up.
Right.
And, and, that one up. And, and, and that's not the case. In fact, the mistakes that we've made give us the opportunity to consume that, learn from that, and pass that information on to our team. And the real point is, it's actually not good enough to say we can't make the same mistake twice. You hear that all the time, but that's actually not good enough in the aerospace industry.
Yeah.
You can't just say don't make the same mistake twice as an individual. We as a team, as a company, and ideally, eventually, as an industry, we can't make the same mistake twice as a group.
Yeah.
If you start wiping out all those, we've seen that one before, then you can actually begin to accelerate how quickly you're moving.
Wow.
So
good.
And we actually had a conversation with Hans the other day
awesome.
on the show, and he was talking to that too. And it's more than just that single mistake, right? It's what if we made this mistake, what other similar mistakes might we have made? What in our system is not working? What are we not doing, or what are we doing wrong? And looking at across the board anything similar. And I think that's really, really valuable.
Couldn't agree more. The real value in a failure investigation and a fault tree, in many ways, isn't that direct cause or that root cause. It's the quote other findings in the investigation, right?
And it might not even be related to
It might not be.
It might be on a totally different branch of the tree.
Yeah. If you do it well, you're not just finding, okay, it was this pinout on this connector, all done. It's, well, how did we arrive at the bad pinout on this connector from a design standpoint, an engineering release standpoint, policies, procedures, protocol, training, everything. And you're sweeping that tip to tail in the vehicle. So you're wiping out every subset of similar failures, for the next go. And then, and that's only tied to kind of the systems engineering process of that failure. But inevitably you work your way down a fault tree and you say, this turned out to not be credible whatsoever to the investigation. But, that could have been a rocket killer on another one. Let's take care of that
one. Yeah.
And so for every one failure, if you do it right, you're actually wiping out 10, 15, 20 failures, all in that one go.
Really good. Really important.
Yeah, really cool. And what we're talking about here is also, it's so interesting because there are some pretty normal psychological barriers and defenses that come up in typical people, right? When they make a mistake that are, get defensive or want to blame someone else. And what we're talking about here is kind of a systematic way of reducing those barriers from coming up so that we're able to learn more and learn faster and not have shame block the way, right? And I think that comes through learning and through practice and through being dedicated to that growth that you've been mentioning throughout. So that's really cool.
I agree, and that's very, very true at the individual level. And then it's important at the team level as well to, recognize that we're not using this as an easy out. We at the end of the day, you have to be taking care of your customers. Failure is not acceptable in flight, but to get to a successful flight or mission as early as possible, do a whole lot of failure along the way in development, and really foster that culture within your team where it's okay that you screwed up because you bragged about it.
Yeah.
Because you let all of us learn from it, that was okay.
Yeah. That's so good. And you talked about originally in hiring for your team, right? You're looking for people who've got that intrinsic motivation because, as you said, some of these goals, there's not the instant gratification. These are long-term goals. Mm-hmm. What are obviously hiring the right team in the first place who gets that? Are there any other tactics you can speak to about keeping people motivated when there are failures, when there are bummers, and when those the gratification is a ways down the line?
Yeah, the end point may be very far down the road, but there are waypoints all along the way. So you have to celebrate incremental victories, right? Find the things that you're very, very proud of along the development roadmap, and really recognize that this is a big deal. Oh yeah, we have a long way to go, but we wouldn't be there without this victory right now, and let's go celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you think you're good at, or people that you've
Am
been
I good
with?
at celebrating?
Yeah, it can be hard, right? To say, oh wow, we did this cool thing, when you know that what you're ultimately working towards is much further down the line. I know I'm not good at that.
It's actually it's really fun you say that. I've what I'm actually thinking about right now is looking back at development of Launcher 1. through the years of engine development, stage development, flight testing, and then, first orbital launch attempt and failure, and then successful launch. I was probably the opposite, and it's super weird. I was having so much fun celebrating every little, intermediate victory along the way, every engine test. And then when the day finally came that we reached orbit and placed customers into their target orbit, that day that I'd been mentally preparing for years and looking forward to, it was super weird. When it was done, I actually felt like pretty empty pretty quickly.
Wow.
And it was like, well, okay. I don't actually understand how to process this, but okay, what are we doing next? How do we get this better?
So interesting.
This is actually not the first time I've heard this. I've
That's reassuring.
Yeah. From a handful of people that I've interviewed who like led teams, right? And they're keeping them jazzed and they're keeping them invested. And there's all this adrenaline, but it's something more long term, right? Where you're the intensity of hiking up the mountain is feeding you. And then arriving after so much blood, sweat, and tears put into something, arriving at the goal can leave people, like, I've even heard the term depressed, right? Like,
okay.
There's this,
sounds right.
There's this sync that happens of we worked so hard and like, we're done. Right? With this one, we're done. And there can be this sync. So it's a very interesting idea that I'm hearing come up as a pattern. That
Yeah. At least it's good that you're enjoying the incremental progress.
Right.
Because if you weren't doing that,
then it's all just not fun. Yeah.
so at least you
It's a
keep
bummer.
yourself mentally healthy in that way, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. Celebrating more was one of my 2023 goals because I'm so bad at that, where we have some great achievement that, a year ago or 2 years ago would have been huge. And I'm just like, okay, on to the next thing. I'm like, hold on, we gotta take time to celebrate.
You gotta. Speaking of though, I did see your solo. You did a solo flight. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. That was huge.
That is awesome.
Yeah. It was
impressive.
Really exciting. What a feeling to be taking off and knowing that you're about to land the plane by yourself.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So on that same vein, then what's next in the aviation world for you?
Yeah, well, so I'm like partway through getting I'm now legally allowed to fly by myself if I talk to my instructor under very specific requirements, right? So like I can't fly anybody else and I wouldn't want to by myself. But so there's still a lot more training until I have my full private pilot's license. And then once I have that, I'm pretty interested in doing some aerobatics. I don't know how far I'll get into it, but if I'm going to be flying my family around, I better know how to get out of a spin, right? So doing a little bit of that.
You agree, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah, I appreciate the safety concern there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's a very fun. Thank you very much. Thanks for celebrating with me. Yeah. So as a high performer and working in these environments,
let's not get carried away.
working in these environments that can be quite demanding. What are some? This is one of my favorite questions. What are some of your practices or habits that you do to keep your mind and body operating in a high energy state?
Well, let's see. A commute can be very valuable because it's a set block of time, not at your desk and not kind of back into the home life. Reflect on, at the smaller piece size, bit of a day, where did I screw up today? How could I have done better, on this project and in a team interaction? Where did I fall short? So it's a good opportunity for just kind of constant check-in, reflection. But value of hobbies, value of something that kind of stresses you out or challenges you on something completely unrelated.
Yeah.
Acrobatics in a plane would be a wonderful example. And as much as I do like to work hard, got to step away and go, take a break and take a vacation for a week here and do something, that brings you back fresh. Because even if you truly are passionate about it, you truly aren't burnt out, wonderful, you still come back with kind of a better clarity, better focus on priorities and what needs to be done when you step away from it more than 5 hours to catch, some sleep.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I love the idea of the reflection period, right? How could I have optimized this better? What did I mess up? How could I have prepared myself better for that? I have a journaling practice in the morning. I look over all the meetings that I have today and kind of what are my goals? What are my objectives? What frame of mind do I mean to be coming into these meetings with? And then in the evening to review kind of how the day went. But that's a question that's not on there, is like explicitly, what did I mess up today? And I think that would be a really useful one, because if you want to remove the discomfort of it, right, process it daily. As you're
that's
saying,
well
right?
said. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
on the commute, process.
Yeah, don't
it
let
daily.
that be a thing that's just you're kicking yourself and feeling down.
Right, right.
But it's just a natural part of what I happened to say earlier, because that was good. Personal agile development, right? It's the same thing.
Right. And exactly. We're not shaming ourselves. We're not, like beating ourselves up for the mistakes. We're processing and learning from the mistakes, which is a pretty important distinction that we're drawing. Take a lot of that pain out of it so that we can continually get better and don't have to worry about like, oh, if I make a mistake, nevertheless, what other people are going to think about me, like I'm going to be mean to myself. If we can remove some of that, that there's a lot of power for growth we can release. Mm-hmm. That was good stuff. Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. I have so many more fun things that I would like to ask of you, but I also know we have such great technical topics. So I'm torn. I don't want to eat it all up.
I will leave this to you too.
Well, I'd love to first ask for you to share a little bit about what is Gravitics doing and what are you finding on the hiring side with growing that team?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So what is Gravitics doing?
Yep.
Build the sky. We want to build the sky and build very large structures that will help enable, an increased off-world presence. What that means right now is we're developing our first vehicle called StarMax. It'll be big by space structure standards.
Okay.
About 8 meters in diameter.
Wow.
It's designed for the next generation of heavy launch vehicles.
Okay.
And I really like to view it as a Lego building block. A very big Lego building block, but a big building block for a variety of purposes that could support ourselves and a lot of customers and users out there.
Very cool. Is it, and the name Gravitics implies gravity. Is there artificial gravity?
Yeah. See, I love this because it's like our own worst kept secret, right? It's right there in the name, and that's something that I love about it because we actually aren't working on that yet.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We have a vision of what's needed to really increase off-world presence, and a big part of that is artificial gravity for long-term, safer, healthier stays and dwelling. That is what we're working toward. But we aren't actually talking about it a whole lot because we've got those first 3 steps that we need to take care of with a key focus on our upfront customers, from which we'll learn and continue to grow our capability.
So cool.
And for the listeners, so will this be in orbit?
This will be in orbit. This will be in low Earth orbit.
This is so cool.
So cool.
So these are dwellings orbiting that regular people would be able to live in.
I'd like to believe, I'd like to believe a wide range of people could live in them. I want to build more. We're launching a lot more. As a society, as an industry. I'd like there to be plenty of destinations for them to show up to. And that could mean a lot of different things depending on the customer, depending on the user. But a big focus is, a safer, more robust, comfortable, and productive habitat for working.
Wow.
This is so exciting.
So exciting.
The future is here.
Yeah, the future is here. That's the truth. Yeah.
So on the talent side of things, we talk to a lot of candidates in our industry and adjacent to our industry, and there's a strong interest in human spaceflight. A lot of people are happy in where they are, but they say, hey, I'd love to consider a new role in human spaceflight. What have you found in your early days at Gravitics on the interest from talent to work in your industry? Is it higher because there's this human space exploration element?
Yeah, I am finding that. It's been super cool. It's been super cool how overwhelming the number of applicants have actually been so far.
Okay.
We're not very well known yet, and don't have a lot of reason to be well known yet, right? We're all looking forward to changing that, and having a real thing in orbit to point to. But even now, have had upwards of 50 applicants a day, and I'm seeing the exact same thing. I'm seeing a pretty even split between folks that have been working in the human spaceflight industry and are excited to take those hard-earned lessons and apply it well to a clean sheet design and operation.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of people inside the spaceflight industry not working in crewed spaceflight that are like, get me in. And I'm seeing a ton of interest and excitement from all kinds of surprising places outside of the industry entirely. And they're saying, find a way for me to help.
So cool.
Wow.
So cool.
So cool. So we want to dive into our technical topic, which is where should humanity focus its space colonization efforts?
Yeah, I think this is a fun one, and it really hits on some of the things that Gravitics is either working on directly or I'm sure has its sights on in the future. So I think to start kind of fundamentally, why do you think we should even have an off-Earth colony? What's the value? Why now? Just a little bit high level perspective here.
Lots of ways you could take that answer, but I'd say, it's hard, it's inspiring, and there's real opportunity for payback. And I mean payback for once, for everyone involved, people off Earth and on Earth.
Very cool. Okay. So then, and we could have a whole episode just about this, but there's a lot of folks out there who say, oh, there's no planet B, and that we should be focusing our efforts on taking care of Earth, fixing Earth. We have a major climate crisis on our hands, and yet there are a fair amount of resources going to other domains like space. What do you think about that perspective? Do you think we should be focusing more on Earth, or is there real benefit to getting off?
I think we're drawing the dividing line in the wrong place. I think there's a place for both. I think they're both needed. I can definitely understand where that question comes from, right?
Yeah.
I look at the news, I read the climate reports, and I'm scared shitless, right?
Yeah.
It's a scary thing, and
Yeah.
it's a very natural. It's a very natural thing, particularly for the uninitiated, to say, well, why aren't we working directly on it? It's not as obvious. There's a few more kind of pathways to kind of logic through to see how that work off-world is leading back to this. But it's important to remember that there are many, many ways that our advancement in spaceflight is helping return back to Earth. We in the industry we hear about plenty of examples, right? But I like to think of it as here's the International Space Station. It's an outstanding engineering achievement. It's took dozens of launches and a couple of decades to go put together, but now it's an operating lab.
Yeah.
Right. And, just in the example of the ISS, there's probably 150 or so, don't quote me on the number, but roughly 150 experiments in any given year. And, I think about half of those, have direct tie back to better understanding of the Earth, its climate, the people on it, physiological responses, improved gene therapy, all kinds of things. And it's a unique opportunity that only exists because the ISS is there.
Yeah.
We have, could talk about all the benefits of all the satellites that are going around, the use of, the cell phone that gave me directions on the drive here, all those things. But, we hear all those things all the time. But, we could probably sit here and brainstorm, 5 more great satellites that, if only it was up there, it could be doing, a much better job with, this emergency response or monitoring methane leaks, the things that would help improve carbon emissions, if only we had a better view of it and better awareness. So we could talk about all of that. But the main takeaway, I think I would offer is to the people not directly involved in clean tech or space flight, recognize that a lot of the people working in the space industry typically, they care a whole hell of a lot about the planet Earth. I know I do. And they are looking for ways to draw meaning to the work that they're doing back to Earth. And by and large, people feel that they're helping in a way that they can in an area that they're passionate about, that also speaks to their strengths and their training and knowledge.
That's so good.
I think with more consortiums and social settings, for more brainstorming, there's more and more opportunity to identify those ways that we can draw on different skill sets and knowledge to better attack all of those problems, whether directly starting on Earth or from an orbital lab or something else. But it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, right? People want to get into the industry from outside, and there are so many brilliant people out there that I would argue that there's probably enough people out there with the aptitude to be working all of these things more or less at once.
Yeah.
And with advances in each one, and a setback in this area, we get a little bit smarter about how this can all weave together. But I really encourage us not to be bickering about whether it's Earth or space, but rather, how do we bring more people into the fold? There are brilliant software engineers out there who are killing themselves, frantically overnight to be ready for the next social media dance craze, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's fun in there's importance in creativity and art. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but the point being, there are brilliant people out there who may be looking for an outlet to help in this, right? And we should really be finding ways to be inviting to them and find ways for them to join in and add their voice to solving these problems.
Man, this is so good. I really love what you're getting at, and the way I've always thought about this question is that people are born with very different passions, and they will be most productive and happiest, and the world will be at its best when people are focused on those passions, and different passions can attack the same problem or attack it from different ways. And I can be passionate about one thing, but know something else is really important, and let other people who are directly passionate about it work on that. And I think that's really, really valuable.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, each of us needs to find that thing that is both, meaningful and personally exciting.
Yeah.
And if you find that overlap, if you seek that out, then you can really go have a more profound impact.
Wow.
And if everyone kind of focuses it that way, then, we'd probably have a perfectly clean planet powered by fusion, and we'd be living on Europa, and it'd all be great. Yeah.
So good. So I think the moon is getting a lot of press these days with Artemis and renewed interest and focus on getting back to the moon. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts of going to the moon and having that be a place that we kind of build up some off-Earth colonization.
Well, I think it's a critical activity, and I think it's insufficient on its own. Right?
Okay.
And that same answer would apply to if we're talking about going to Mars, or just quote just hanging out in Leo, low Earth orbit. All of these, I think, are critical activities that will overall build up our capability, and each one is insufficient on its own. Okay.
So what do you see as some of the benefits of take any one of those? I think there are three that are most well known or well studied or closest to happening, which would be low Earth orbit, the moon, and Mars. There are certainly others that can be considered, but I think those are some of the big ones. What do you see as some of the upside and downside of those different options?
Well, let's dive in. I'll do my best. No particular order really, but Mars obviously has a lot of excitement behind it. That actually is a good reason in and of itself, right? It's stimulating.
Yeah.
And
It's
just to touch on that, like I think you've even said, "Oh, doing a problem that's inspiring is compelling," and I think that's a big thing that Elon talks about when he's talking about SpaceX and talking about Mars is just that motivation of doing something that seems impossible, right? And that's what we felt in the not me literally, but society in like the 60s and going to the moon, like doing this thing that we didn't think we could do, and that inspiration for humanity by itself is maybe even enough.
It's something that I would be excited about, but continue to have to find ways to make it, for lack of any better word here, worth it for as many people involved. But what excites me about Mars is, in many ways, I view it as kind of the stressing case, the stressing design case that because it's so expensive, from a Delta V standpoint to get there, it's such a long journey. I think it will really, again, be the stressing design case for a lot of the technologies we have to get going. I personally would love to see, nuclear thermal propulsion, nuclear electric, power systems, really getting their day, which would, really increase what we can go do at Mars. That trip is so hard. It's so long to get there. It's so expensive in every sense of the word to get there that you won't want to get.
Can you remind people what some of those costs or times are? I think the trip is 8 or 9 months,
depending on when you launch and depending upon the capability of the propulsion system.
Yep.
A more powerful, a more capable propulsion system could open up that window and give you kind of a little more operational flexibility.
Yeah, because you can spend more Delta V to get there quicker.
Sure.
Right. And then how much more Delta V is it to get to maybe Mars versus the moon? Do you know roughly offhand?
How does it go? It's significant. It's something like, well, actually, I think I had looked at that before. Yeah, it's something
Ballpark.
like going from, the difference between going from Leo to the moon is, something like, 12x and then double that again, getting to Mars.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and those numbers directly correlate to how much mass you can send for the same price or something like that, essentially.
Yeah, it's either less mass that ends up there or more limited windows that you can leave. So, it would suck if you were leaving your house to, go to that great party or whatever, and halfway there you realize you forgot something. Well, you don't get to go back.
Yeah.
Not easily. So, and that really kind of, I think, leads to the point I was making with Mars. Amazing in that because it's a challenging mission case, it will drive a lot of the it will meaningfully drive a lot of the big step changes in the technologies that we'll have in the industry.
It's a good forcing function.
It's a good forcing function. Long-term stays, because it takes a while to get there, you're going to want to stay around for a while when you get there. That means it's really going to be a driving, stressing case for things like radiation, radiation protection. But for a long time, it's also going to be brittle, right? Because you're sending so few people with such little equipment, distanced so far apart. It's going to take a long time to build up something that's really robust and resilient. Has good, biodiversity in your lab or anything of the sort. So, one small issue can have a pretty large cascading impact.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's, brittle. I'm very excited about it. I think we should be doing it. Compare that to the moon. Still very difficult to get there. We have done it a few more times. And, from an energy equation standpoint, it will be easier to get there more often. There's a physics-based basis for getting there more frequently, and it can be a good proving ground for testing out new technologies and infrastructures and operational sequences to go scale the number of people involved, the number of people, at that, settlement. And so I think there's, a tremendous amount of value there. It is literally, our nearest solid footing.
Yeah.
Then you can talk about LEO, and I'm personally very excited about it. Obviously, I'm working on it right now, but LEO, a lot of different ways you could talk about it, but I'd call it, LEO is our near-term path to a truly mass agnostic design, right? We talked about the delta V costs to get, to LEO or to the moon or to Mars. By comparison, it is relatively very easy to get into LEO and test something out. So what's exciting to me is really these different destinations are not just going to drive different technologies, but they're going to drive different development approaches, right? Mars being that stressing case, and you have to get it right because it's going to take a while before you get your next shot. Everything has to be pinpoint perfect, but it will drive hopefully some great step changes in technology like the nuclear thermal propulsion that we talked about. LEO, relatively easy to get there. You can go try things. If you think of it as your training hike, because we said mountains earlier. Yeah. If you're going on a shorter training hike, you can take some bolder steps, right? You can try out some new footwear. You can take a little more aggressive path, because if you roll your ankle, you're only hobbling back a few miles. That's not the worst thing at the end of the day. So you can take bolder steps and follow a little bit more truly that agile development approach, and really iterate on some cool concepts. So that's one great thing about it. And like I was saying, it's a pathway to a truly mass agnostic design. Particularly with next generation heavy lift launch vehicles, we have an opportunity to be lifting some very, very large structures up that have more capability and can then be a platform for trying all kinds of new technologies as a pathfinder for Moon or Mars or beyond, right? So they really do all play a part. What would make me happy beyond happy would be a thing. It probably starts with phase 1, LEO and Mars, actually, followed by a stronger presence on the moon and cislunar transportation. Where focusing on that Mars mission now again is that forcing function for the bigger technologies. LEO is your proving ground where you can relatively speaking, very quickly iterate on things, take concepts for habitation, try out spin gravity, things that will matter in the long run. Then, because it will take a while to continue to send more people to Mars, I do think there's a pathway to be really growing up, something closer resembling a colony than a landing, on the moon. And that's pretty exciting. Yeah. And then ultimately you take the technologies and the learning from each of those things, the nuclear thermal propulsion from Mars, the radiation environment protection from Mars, the complex sequencing and scaled growth and supply chain for the moon, and the quick turn concepts in habitation and spin gravity and LEO. You put those all together and you take a bold crew and you send them out beyond. And that's when you can really be, talking someday about, a very distributed presence in space.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Really cool. Really fun to hear all these thoughts.
I have a question. I think it's a dumb question.
Nope.
But I wanna go there. So, okay. So we're talking about Gravitics.
You got it.
Nice.
There it is. We can end the show.
Yeah, perfect. So creating these habitats in LEO for operation in LEO. Then we're talking about how hard it is to get to the moon and what we would be building there, what we'd be building in Mars. I imagine it'd be really difficult to get something that large, right? We're talking about a very large space vehicle to the moon or Mars. Would there be, I'm talking, long term, is there any vision for having these habitats for these other locations? Because I imagine there's going to be a time where we can get there, we can get people there, but it's also not that easy to get people immediately, landed and set up on Mars. Is that any part of the vision?
Not a dumb question. A little bit tricky to talk about because we're just getting started, of course. But like I said before, I like to think of StarMax and the vehicles that we'll be building as the Lego building block.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
You get a kit of nondescript blocks, and you choose what you need to do with them.
Yeah.
Horrible oversimplification of the task at hand. But it's really how you got to think about it.
Yeah.
If I had a vehicle that's not perfectly optimized to each of those things, but is sufficient and capable to do all of those things, and we can build them quickly, you can start to imagine a lot of different use cases for them. But right now, focused on the first mission at hand.
Totally. So cool. I've got a whole image in my mind. It's so cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Gravitics is working basically on the working assumption that these large launch vehicles come into, I'm blanking on the word, like into use soon, probably, right? Talk to me a little bit about that. Does that feel risky at all? How strong of a bet is this on Starship versus anything else? Are there contingency plans? Love to hear your thoughts about that. Yeah,
it's a good question. And there's, again, a lot wrapped up in there. But first of all, I believe that we're going to progress beyond the existing launch vehicles that we have and continue to have increased capabilities, and let's be ready for them. There's a few maybe different ways to look at that, but I wrote this down too. What was it? Last year we had a record number of launches, is like 186. I think 180 of them were successful. 8 years before it was half that.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
The rate of launch is increasing, the capability is increasing. That trend I want to see continue, and I think it will. And if that really does continue, we need to have more destinations for them. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful, like tipping the scale back to put pressure on the destination for a while it was launch.
Yeah.
So, I'm bullish on the trend. And you can bicker and you can debate about, will each of those next gen launch vehicles show up, or in what order, between Starship and New Glenn and Vulcan. All I'll say right now is, we are prepared for all of them and beyond. And, we have conviction that we're going to keep advancing as an industry, and we want to be a part of that. But at the same time, we're very conscientious about, the tooling approaches that we set up, and being able to making sure that we're not locked in as some fringe point design that dies with, a launch vehicle, or a shift in the design of the vehicle. So we think a lot about that, but overall we're very bullish.
Yeah, very cool. Me too. And
good.
Do you have any incremental projects or milestones that don't rely on these large launch vehicles for Gravitics to be able to be making progress while waiting for?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a long development road ahead of us.
Sure.
Anyhow, we're very conscientious about, as always, be mindful to your customers. You're nothing without your customers. So, pay good attention to that. Make sure we're working toward what they need while working along our overarching vision. But then working toward, again, what is that first mission, and what do we need to do to get there? And as much as possible, being agnostic to any, evolution in the industry over the next couple of years shouldn't really phase us a whole lot. It doesn't change the next 90 out of 100 steps that we have to take. And so we're very focused on those first 90 steps.
That's good to hear. That's great. And then let's see here. So if I could give Scott Macklin $1 billion to focus efforts on colonization.
Is that the prize for coming on the show?
Yeah. Once I have enough to be able to do that, maybe. Where would you direct those dollars? Where it's kind of looping back to the previous question, but where do you want to see those efforts be going first and foremost with those?
Let's see. I think I would be putting that toward a next generation terrestrial modular nuclear fission reactor. for carbon-free energy on Earth. Taking that as kind of pathfinder work from a technological standpoint and regulatory standpoint to then go get on it on the nuclear thermal propulsion that will really drive what we can do in space. And funny enough, that's like an unintentional, tie back to exactly what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Earth and space are interwoven, and findings and learning from one tie right back into the other and then bounce back into the other. So, I'll take that billion whenever you have it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
Good to know.
So cool. This is incredible. I know we're over time here. I feel like we could just keep talking. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and this is so fun. This is so fun to learn about. Too. Awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom. I know the listeners are going to eat this up and probably have a lot more questions to ask. So we're gonna
reach out to me if you do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Where can people reach you?
On LinkedIn or through our official pages, on Twitter or LinkedIn, search Gravitics and you should be able to find us.
Wonderful. And we'll have all that information in the show notes.
And again, shameless plug at the end. Of course, we are hiring. So
great.
Reach out.
Absolutely. Anything specific that you're hiring for that you want people to know about?
Well, right now, really focused on some, heavy hitters in propulsion and GNC and flight software and structures and mechanisms. And by heavy hitters, again, back to our conversation earlier, I don't mean that you've necessarily done this 4 times over, but you're hungry and motivated and work hard and willing to, admit to mistakes and learn from them and bounce back from them and keep going. And willing to work, on a really hard project, with a collaborative team.
So cool.
I'm fired up.
Yeah, I'm fired up, right? Very, very cool. Well, thank you again for being on our show. To the listeners, thanks for tuning in to AdAstra With, where you get to learn from industry professionals in NewSpace and Clean Tech startups, to learn from their career development and get behind the scenes insights into technical topics. Thanks for listening to the stars. Coming back on because we record these shows, these podcasts at a place in Long Beach called The Podcast Place, and our producer, the man who runs this whole place, is incredible. His name's Solomon, and he's producing as we're recording. He works incredible magic. He's a wizard. He's a wizard. I can't brag more about The Podcast Place. And we end these shows, and Solomon will go like, "Hey, I have a question," and then he asks this incredible question. We're like, we definitely should have talked about that on the show. So he had a couple of those. So Solomon, take it away. What were your questions?
All right, thank you. Thanks for giving me the stage. So just in listening to talking about going into space and having these 3 areas where you're going to focus on building, the first thing I thought of, low Earth orbit gives us the ability to actually build in space. I mean, doesn't it make sense to then focus on that area of space, and that way it gives you the capability to then do the other things even more efficiently?
When are you joining as a permanent host? Super good question. I love the question, especially because, that kind of is where we're focusing at Gravitics, right? And you hit the nail on the head with a lot of it. A few thoughts there. Again, LEO is relatively easy to get to, relatively easy to iterate in for all kinds of things. We've talked a lot about habitats, just happened to on this call, but it's also, again, that platform for experimentation of the technologies that we'll need to go further. A big one for that is in-space manufacturing and assembly. That's something that really excites me. We want to go build very large structures, lay a framework so that you can be building even bigger ones, in orbit, more efficiently, and sending them to other destinations. Another big one is in space resource utilization or in space 3D printing. I'm attracted to the moon because there's probably opportunities to be testing out, habitat construction methods. Again, by comparison, relatively easily, as compared to Mars. Get there, lay habitats, lunar regolith is a pretty good radiation block. A couple feet of it, should do pretty well for maybe half a year living there. That can be shoveled on top, or that can be actually 3D printed into the structure itself. And I know there are concepts out there, and it'd be exciting to see that. So again, low Earth orbit is a great place for your training hike. You can pretend that you're going on a long journey, but if you forgot something back home, you can send it up.
Yeah.
Your training hike with Bear Grylls, but despite what he tells you, you don't actually have to drink your own pee if you got something wrong.
Not to mention, it'd be a lot easier to create an economy in low Earth orbit, which could then, create revenue for some of these other projects as well.
Yeah, and they feed right off of each other, right? More opportunities to get there more quickly means more economy that you can build up, means you can try more things a little more readily. I said before that LEO is your pathway to a truly mass agnostic design for the first time really ever. With the next generation launch vehicles, and if you truly have a mass agnostic design, you can go fat, dumb, and heavy, with your safety factors in your design. Right. That is, a pathway to faster design and iteration and trying new things. Again, fat safety factors means, more, faster.
Right.
And, it snowballs in a very good way as a, leaping off point.
We're already starting to see safety factors and how people approach getting to orbit change.
Mm-hmm.
There's less redundancy, higher safety factors, all these things, because the cost of orbit's gotten a lot lower. There's people are willing to take a lot higher risk, and that's only going to keep changing.
Yep.
So good.
More access begets more access, begets more ideas, begets more access.
Yeah.
So great. Well, that was a little Easter egg for people who stuck around. So you all might have to listen to the end for future podcasts to get the Solomon Says segment of the show. So
we got a name for it.
Yeah.
Solomon Says. I like it.
Thanks again, everybody. That's a wrap.